All right, I will call the meeting to order. I ask the clerk to take the roll.
Carroll.
Here.
Brewer. Glassburner.
Here.
Turk.
Here.
Frank. Williamson.
Here.
And 4 present.
And are we in compliance with the open meetings law?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the meeting is properly noticed.
Thank you. We have a 13-point agenda before us now. Motion to approve the agenda. So moved. Motion by Williamson. Second by Glassburner to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We also have minutes from our October 1st, 2024 meeting. Any questions, corrections, details we need to fix on those? Hearing none, I will declare those minutes to be approved. Item 6, public comment. Any members of the public here wish to address the committee tonight? Yes.
Never mind the logo on the laptop. That's the night job. I read the minutes of the last meeting and I would.
Some of us know you, but some of us don't.
Oh, I apologize. My name is Brandon Federley. I live in Carrie Severson's district, whichever number that ends up being. I also am employed at Ithaca Public Schools.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate, when you live in Richland County for more than 20 years, you just assume that everyone knows everyone, right? I read the minutes of the last meeting and I think they were very well done. Derek, you did a great job. Thank you. I'm going to ask a couple of pointed questions and they're not meant to cast blame. They're meant to ask pointed questions. There was some equipment that went from the campus to the fire department, correct? Tables?
10 tables about this size.
I'm not saying that the fire department is not deserving. Are there other county institutions that are just as deserving? All right. For instance, like I said, pointed question, school districts, charities, foundations, trusts, things of that nature that use equipment to the betterment of county citizens. Because if we have an auction, there are better funded municipalities and schools that will take equipment for pennies on the dollar. So I'm going to make a plea that if the fire department is deserving, are there any other institutions in the county that are just as deserving? I'm not saying that anything be given for free. At least give us the ability to make a reasonable offer so that we can use what was at the campus that served the county to continue to serve the county. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to speak? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 7, which is a couple of different reports. The first one being a detailed presentation from Venture Architects, the facility assessment findings. I will let Kyle introduce himself and anybody else we have online.
Do not need to do anything with my mic.
No, you should be good. It should catch your voice. Speak a little louder than normal. But make sure we catch it.
Got it. Yes, I am Kyle Knope. I'm with Venture Architects. Richland County had hired us after I'll say rigorous RFP, request for proposal process back in December for a county-wide facility assessment and master planning process. So what we will be reporting tonight is the outcomes from that facility assessment. And that facility assessment was for all of the buildings other than the Simon Center and the East Building on the UW Richland campus. And it included the Health and Human Services Building, Seminary Street, correct street, make sure I have that right, I should know. And the courthouse, the sheriff's office, and the jail and county services building. So that was the extent of what our assessment was. And that assessment included reviews by our professionals on from landscape architecture, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, plumbing engineer, mechanical engineer, and architectural, both from a interior building facility standpoint and exterior building envelope component. So a fairly rigorous analysis of that. Also, at the same time, Venture Architects also is conducting the master planning and space needs analysis of existing departments to identify what is the right size that those departments need. Again, all of these are components that we'll use to make those determinations of what space departments need and where can they go? Are they in the right spot? And how do these play into the available spaces that are at the campus level? So with that, and share my screen. It is not correct. Okay. Yep. Good. So with that, we can start on the UW Richland County campus side, and what you see here is a dashboard from the tool that we were using for our assessment, and it collects. We were collecting all these different data points, and with that, then costs can be associated with that, and an order of magnitude can be associated with that. I also have for the committee sort of a more individualized breakout by building that we looked at. And one thing I do want to just point out is on the first page of that is, and I can go to this just for anybody online, is the key part, which is our condition definitions. And I say that from the standpoint of there may be items that we talk about here that are showing up as being good, or they're fair, or they're very good. And just because something is good or fair doesn't necessarily mean that it is really, really great. There's a lot of items on there. So as an example, for good, the definition for that is good, adequate for now. The infrastructure in the system or network is in good to excellent condition. Some elements show signs of general deterioration that require attention. A few elements exhibit significant deficiencies, safe and reliable with minimal capacity issues and minimal risk. So we may have, as a team, identified something as being good, but that also doesn't mean that that does not need zero attention. So there could be items that when our team was reviewing something, it would be assigned good, even though there were those repairs that were needed. The other item that also I think just requires some reinforcement is how we rate it fair, and that is mediocre or requires attention. And that has the infrastructure in the system or network is in fair to good condition. It shows general signs of deterioration and requires attention. Some elements exhibit significant deficiencies in conditions and functionality with increasing vulnerability to risk. So when you hear that, think of fair as being likely something that needs attention in the near future. So when you start looking at how a lot of these items have been assessed, then good might be something that I would say is it's an acceptable condition and it may need some attention. Fair is we're needing to get some attention on there pretty soon. And then from poor to very poor to failing, it's progressively on the more concerning side of needing attention. With that being said, we can do a high-level review of what the UW Richland County campus buildings are. And you can see we have a tree map here, which is this sort of block diagram on the left side of the screen. And it identifies those items that are fair, good, poor, and then it breaks it out by building. But then we can also look at the pie chart that we have here for 38% of all of the items that were assessed, or 249 assets that we had identified that were identified as fair, 16% or 106 poor, 63 had identified as being failed. And then we had 60 or 99% or 60 items as being very poor. On the opposite side of that, roughly a quarter of the items that were assessed were identified as being in good condition, and even less than that, that would be 1% as being in very good condition. So overall, if we look at all of the buildings, we can move to a plan of what the campus looks like, and this actually is rather apropos because this is the drawing we have here is prior to the Simon Center being constructed. If we look at all of this, this is identifying that when we go back to that, 28% of what is out there on the campus is in good condition. It may need some work, but 28%. That leaves a far greater amount that's out there in some way in one of those buildings as needing some significant attention. So with that then, yes, we have this document up here when we're looking at the site plan. I think one other item to take note of is just the relative specialty nature that a lot of those buildings are in terms of from a use standpoint and from a reuse standpoint. So when we look at building A, which is the science building, this drawing does not have the addition that was put on in 2000, but we have that here on the far right side. The long linear building on the lower right side is the Copper Top, which is the cafeteria and theater building. And then also to the north of that is the B building, which is the arts and education building. Just kind of take those three buildings right off the bat and just have a discussion about that. The building A, the science building, with that new addition, there were some very significant additions and modifications that were made to that building that really were a great enhancement to it. There were also some parts that were left and for I'll say of no cause to the building. They didn't need to be fixed. They didn't, and they weren't fixed. And so things like that might be ceilings, some flooring in the original A building addition or A building that's there. Now with that, from a reuse standpoint, that building gets really limited because the addition part has a number of labs that have they have fume hoods in them. They have lab countertops. For how our team looks at that is, okay, what could we put in that building for a reuse standpoint? It gets extremely limited to really a sciencey lab type of application that's there. Now there was the distance learning room that was in there. That was very well done. And there's the idea of, well, maybe that could be a great reuse application for, say, like the boardroom with all of the AV equipment that's in there. The unfortunate part of that is that's really the only use we could find that would like appropriately fit into that building because of all of the specialty uses on the lab side of it. So that's where our team began to, as we were going through looking at the conditions of everything and then also understanding the use, trying to make these puzzle pieces fit in together in some way or another. So the A building, the science building becomes a little bit of a challenge from a reuse standpoint for county purposes. We'll go to the E building, to the Copper Top. That too, much in the same manner as A building, being very science and lab focused. The E building becomes very focused on a theater, a music performance standpoint, music rehearsal, and a commons cafeteria, commercial kitchen type of operation. Again, the theater takes up a good portion of that building, and there are some because there hasn't been an addition to that building as building A, the science building had, there are some significant ADA challenges with that building that would need to be brought up to current Americans with Disability Act standards. So there was some addition or there are some modifications made from the bathroom standpoint where the clearances aren't currently there. And a small family bathroom was fit out in one of the vestibules of the building in order to accommodate that. The kitchen is in very good condition. That, like especially from our plumbing, mechanical, electrical team, they were very surprised at the really good condition it is. Granted, it was operational up to a little over a year ago, so they've taken great care of that. From a reuse standpoint, what kind of use does the county have that could go back in there? Again, now we have that challenge of, well, it's a theater, so that becomes really limiting. So that part of it, if the intent is there for the county to have a community theater program, that has possibility in that case. If the county isn't currently in the community theater program, then that may need to be a consideration for potentially having that for the ability for another community theater to lease, if the county would prefer that. So that is an option that's there. There would need to be some significant changes relative to the ADA accessibility part of that, if that would be the case. And we have some of those numbers in the handout that I had provided with that. The open commons area, that actually has, I would say, a great deal of potential for reuse, just because it is an open area. It would be more of an application of potentially some small departments that could be in there that would need a more open communal space where people could come and the kitchen would be able to be utilized for that purpose. And that would be something we would be looking at as sort of a next step from this assessment. So in that step, the e-building 2 becomes a little bit too specialized for a direct use for reuse for county service. The B building, again, those are just classrooms. So one would think, hey, a lot of potential with that. But that building is a real odd bird from the standpoint of it has 2 unique structural systems in that building, which is both steel, load-bearing steel columns and load-bearing masonry walls. And oddly enough, and you can kind of see in the plan the way it's set up here, these little legs that are coming off both the northwest and the southeast side, that's kind of the direction that those load-bearing masonry walls are. So if you imagine just drawing 2 lines, actually, I'll show you what that would look like, because that is probably the more helpful way to see that. If you were to just have these two masonry walls going through there, now you have these load-bearing structural walls in the middle of the building, and the ability to reuse that entire space becomes really limited because that building's cut out in thirds. And the footprint that's in those areas, in those thirds, really now become the spot that you are able to then say, hey, what kind of department can we put in this space that we're showing now? Now, that being said, those walls could go away. You could put more structural steel in there and open that whole thing up, but that comes at a significant cost. And then when you start looking at where the location of that building is on the campus in relation to parking, it becomes sort of a little bit of an outlier to, is that the best use of that space? Mechanically, that building, what's the best way to, it had commercial equipment in there. That commercial equipment was replaced with residential equipment. That residential equipment went from air handling units to residential furnaces, and those furnaces are at the end of life. So any type of modification to that building or reuse of that building would require all new mechanical systems, and our team recommended that those be commercial units that would be put in there. So there were some relatively, I'll say, short-sighted mechanical implementations on a number of the buildings at the campus that went from a more commercial use to a more residential use that may have saved a fair deal of cost at that time, but it extremely limited the future of that building moving forward. A lot of those changes were over 20 years ago, so those pieces of equipment are now really, they're operating. I can relate to this, and I think I had said this at the September 3rd meeting relative to equipment we have at our house. I have an air conditioning condensing unit outside our house. It is over 30 years old, and every year when that first heat comes, you pray that it can get to 31 years and 32 years. And we do our best to try to get these things to limp along. And I believe when you look at the cost of having all of these buildings and the replacement cost of all of the mechanical equipment, it's substantial. So going in that path, it's understandable why that decision was made. It's just that now in today's world, it's an item that we're having to address as part of that. So with that, also I should say one other item with Building B is the restrooms also, or there's a number of ADA related issues with that building that would need to be brought up to code. And along with that, that would then sort of landlocked because there are the restrooms are in that inside third. So it would require a little bit of manipulation of either losing space in order to gain more space on the restroom side, or being able to have additional clearance at doors and that. So really, Building B is, well, it has in plan, as an architect, you look at a square building like that and say, boy, that has a lot of potential. When we got in that building, it really is a bit of a mess with that. So, and as we've identified with that, I believe that was page 2. We've identified the deferred maintenance costs associated with Building B at $632,000. And then to actually do a full renovation of that building to make it operational, we have that cost assigned or budgeted at $3.5 million. And then for a point of reference for that, if you were to build the same type of building, and this is going off of the idea of this being replicated as a classroom building of that size, that would be equal to 4.2 million. So you'll notice that as we go through it on a number of these buildings, that delta between the replacement costs and the renovation cost is somewhat different, because we're identifying what the use could potentially be with that and the magnitude of what that replacement would need to be. So as one other item with that, deferred maintenance cost really just deals with the critical items. It does not even deal with if there is worn out carpeting, not dealing with that. If there is flooring tile that's coming up, it's dealing with that. That number is in that deferred maintenance cost. The deferred maintenance cost also takes into account the windows that all of the campus buildings have that are single pane aluminum sliding glass windows. The deferred maintenance cost does include a value to switch that to an insulated glass unit, so it's much more efficient, and it is typically what is used today for any type of project. What is not included in that deferred maintenance cost are these items like ADA related issues that would need some level of significant reconstruction of the building. That cost is identified as part of that renovation cost. So if you have a question anywhere along the way here as to, hey, is that in the deferred maintenance cost, or is that part of renovation, just go ahead and ask it, and It's not like crystal clear as how all of that is. Roofing, yes, part of that, if there's damaged brick, it's part of that damaged concrete, part of that deferred maintenance cost. Okay. Any questions so far on science building, copper top, or the education building? Yes, Steve.
So the new information you've given us, this intermediate number of renovation cost,
Yes.
you give us which of the good, fair, or what level does that bring everything up to?
That would bring everything up to, I would say, roughly the level of, as we had it on there, if I go back to that, that brings that up to the good condition. It gets us above fair, gets us to good, bordering on maybe 1 foot in either canoe of very good or good, if that makes some level of understanding. So I'm trying to think of a direct application of what that might be that would not to really define your question, and that would be the flooring that is in most of the buildings out there without doing any asbestos testing of that. Due to the age of all of those buildings, it's likely that at least the adhesive has some form of asbestos containing material, if not the floor tile. So the deferred maintenance cost does include that part of the removal of the flooring. But if there was, I'll say in the science building, this is actually would be a good example of that. In that addition in the science building, they put vinyl composite tile down. And in 2000, and that would be in good enough condition to keep. That being said, that's a we'll say a 25-year-old floor based off of what the condition that it's in. So in a case like that, we would go through a building, see that vinyl composite tile, knowing that it was installed in 2000, and identify that as being good, if that makes sense.
And another way to ask the question would be, what is the remaining life of the building get us at that renovation cost?
Yes, and that's a good question. So if the deferred maintenance piece were to be invested to get it up to that level, you would have, like, again, that would be likely a 10 to 15 year observed remaining life to that structure, if it was just left as is. Any other questions?
And confirm, the flooring in this classroom building was tested, it does have asbestos.
Thank you. Okay, so we can go back to the plan now. That gets us to building C, D, and F. C being the library, D being Melville Hall. This diagram showing the original part of Melville Hall, not the addition that was put on in 1997. I have a diagram that will indicate what that is. And then F being the gymnasium. So C, the library, big open space. We were very excited to get in there and look at that. I'd mentioned this at the public meeting. When our team got in there, we looked at the existing drawings. We're like, oh, I think any building's got potential here. It's going to be this one. Yeah, there's got air handling units in here. Those could be replaced. Like this, there could be something here. When we went up the scuttleway to get to the roof access hatch to look at the air handling units, we were met with another roof above the roof, and which seemed odd. And then we're looking around and did not find any air handling units. And as we're looking around, we understood what had happened historically, which was the air handling units were in I'll say a bathtub. So you have the angled copper roofs. And then there was this open area, and those air handling units were picked up, lifted off, removed. They built a roof, a flat roof over that top, and then replaced the air handling units with residential furnaces. They're big. I mean, it's a big furnace, but the size of that is really dictated by the size of the scuttleway where the ladder is to get you up into there. So there are 4 furnaces that are being used in the library as opposed to the 2 air handling units that are there. So when our team looked at that, we had talked about it that night when we reviewed that, like, how would you go about, like, if you had to reuse that library for, we'll just say for a library purpose, not even applying any kind of department to that. The one option that we came up with is that you could get a larger size commercial air handling unit, have it mounted on the ground, and then have ductwork built up on the outside of the building to go up into that like little rooftop area, and then use the existing ductwork that's in there. So that wouldn't have to get replaced. It's not the best solution, but it's a solution that could work for that purpose. And that little exercise that we had was kind of indicative of a lot of the fixes that we were trying to think about with a lot of these buildings as to how, okay, this is kind of unique. How would we recommend to the county that this could be reused? And it's a lot of pieces like that. It's not the perfect solution, but it is a better solution than what's currently there. So with that, that is one piece on the mechanical side for the library that is a bit of a limiting factor for the purposes of reuse for the library. I don't know the date, but it appears that there was carpeting put in there for 2 purposes. One, to mitigate a lot of sound in a library. We typically expect libraries to be a bit more of a quieter environment, but it also was meant to cover up all of the asbestos tile or the tile that's in there that was starting to curl up. So that if you pull it up, you've got to take care of all of it, or you just cover it up and it's all taken care of. That was the approach that was taken. Now all of the carpet is starting to delaminate due to the tiles delaminating, and there is a bit of an issue on the flooring side in the library. The other tight part of the library, we can take a look at it here, and this is where we start getting into the challenge of, well, how do you determine the difference between the deferred maintenance cost and a building renovation cost? And if we go to this floor plan, you can disregard many of the colored blocks here. We're going to go to this area over here, which is the southwest corner of the library. So the restrooms in that library do not meet the current ADA standards, and the reason for that is there needs to be enough clearance on the handle pull side or the push side of the door that one could easily position themselves in a way to get close enough to the door and open it up and still have enough clearance to then get out. This is clearly, as you can see here, it's a 3'4" corridor, and there's really no room there that is allowing anyone to get in there. There's also, as you can see, I've put on here a 5'7" turning radius. This is the new turning radius. This is one of the challenges that we have, I'll say, as architects in the state of Wisconsin. Currently, we are operating off of 15 International Building Code. It seems really odd that we're working on a 10-year-old, soon to be 10-year-old code, but that code always comes out every 3 years, and the state doesn't always adopt that code right away. They let sort of one generation to go. The gap here, why we have the gap, is the year that they would have approved the new code was a COVID year, and it just kind of did not get approved. This last October, the legislature did not approve the 2021 IBC. So we're still working off of the 2015 IBC. That all being said, if you fast forward to today and you look at the 2021 IBC and the new ADA code, the turning radius for a wheelchair went from 5 feet to 5'7". That is significant for us because we could come in anywhere and say, hey, we're designing this to code, which is our current code, which is 2015. But the new code, which would be adopted, would increase that radius by 7 inches. And we could essentially, if that got adopted, have designed you something that is completely not up to code. It's a little bit confusing, but what we are attempting to do with all of our new projects is look at how this new yet to be adopted code for the state would be applicable so it doesn't put anybody into a little bit of a code-related pickle. 5'7" circle. Size of a turning radius for a wheelchair. There are some spots where it works, but it clearly is it's a bit of a tight maneuver when you start looking at how that would go in that bathroom. The issue with the library specifically is in order to get that extra room just at that front entryway where that door is, we're tight. We've got an exterior wall on the west side of the building. We've got an exterior wall on the south side of the building, and we really don't have any room to grow either way. So if the restrooms wanted, if the county wanted to reuse the library building, the restrooms would need to be upgraded to meet ADA compliance. And in order to do that, and the building would literally need to be added on to get that extra little bit of space to accommodate that in the bathroom. It would be extremely expensive square footage at that point, as much as it could only be maybe 8 feet on either side. We didn't do the full in-depth review of that, but it gets kind of complicated at that point. So when you look at the building renovation cost to the building replacement cost, that's where there can be these points where it's like, why is this one so darn close to what the replacement would be? It's because of things like that. And we're having to look at, oh my gosh, like we're having to add all of these different things onto these buildings just to make them. So that is one item that we noticed with the library. Again, with all of the buildings, the brick is in good to fair shape. There's some spots where there's some bricks falling off. Most buildings need some level of tuck pointing. They all have that single pane glass. The roof is in relatively good condition, I will say. In all conditions, the copper roofs that are on those buildings have held up remarkably well. And the addition to Melville Hall, which we'll get to in a second here, they attempted to mimic the copper with like more of a patinaed, pre-finished standing seam roof. It looks really good. And if there's any intent to renovate these buildings, that would be a recommendation we would make for a cost saving component to do standing seam copper now. That's a significant investment to do. And the numbers that we have in here are not reflective of replacing roofs with standing seam copper. It's standing seam, pre-finished standing seam steel roof on that. Just so you understand that that's not like a massive investment in copper. So that is the library building. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that was identified with that different from any of the other buildings. No, we'll go to D, Melville Hall. Melville Hall started, as you can see here, very similar into the size of building B, A, B, and C. It had added a courtyard to it, and then there was an addition in 1997 for that building. And we can look at that. This is kind of a combination of what those are as well. bringing that up. So the addition is in good shape. That has really helped a lot. When you look at the numbers here, the addition really picked up the lion's share of the good, very good, and fair part of that. The original building really brought forth a lot of those other values down a bit. What I've identified here on this document is just from, and it can be a discussion that we have later, but I just wanted to identify when the addition went on, there were some bathrooms, original bathrooms that were in the original building, and they were smaller. What they did, they actually expanded those to be to meet accessibility requirements. They're really rather nice bathrooms, and they really take up that west side of the courtyard side of the building there. That's that big red bar that I have in there. The other red bars that are on the plan that I've identified here, we're going to call those no-fly zones. So those are areas, rooms that either have mechanical equipment, electrical equipment. It might be a network demarcation room where all the fiber and cabling is coming in there. Rooms that really cannot be moved without a significant cost change. That also would include bathrooms. Can you move bathrooms? Absolutely. Do you want to move bathrooms? If we can prevent it. So what that means then is when we look at this plan, there are a couple of monuments that are here in Melville Hall that can be somewhat restrictive to how to any future use of the building where it is. Now, I can also say that you can look at a lot of these office areas that can be opened up considerably with a renovation that could fit some departments. There is that possibility with that. Again, when we look at Melville Hall, we have that as $155,000 for deferred maintenance. A big part of that is being, the reason that number is the lowest of all of these is because of what was done at the time of that addition. So all new roofing on any of the flat roofs, those were all taken care of both on the addition and on the original building. So they're in fair condition. They're nearing the end of their life. Does that mean that just because it's at 15 years, 20 years, does it need to get replaced immediately? No, you probably still could get a couple more years out of rubber roof membrane, but just be aware that it's getting a little bit to the end of what the life of that is. The renovation cost we have here at 2.5 million, a big portion of that is identified with a lot of the windows that are in there and the replacement cost. And this is just literally, that number is not for a classroom building. We've identified that as being more of like an administrative or office type building. And that would be at $4.45 million. So we can come back and talk about Melville Hall and what are these other squares that are on there. But to wrap up just the discussion of the campus buildings, we can talk about building F, which is the gymnasium. And the gymnasium building is, E, skipping E, we talked about E earlier, the gymnasium building. And so with that, this is where it can be like, okay, how can you have one at 155 million, another one for deferred maintenance at $500,000, and this one's already up to $1.8 million. That we looked at that and said that's a significant difference there. One also has to look at the size of that building. So there is some scale there that happens with that. There's just a lot more roof area on that building, and the roof that's on there is original. So when replacing a roof, there's a lot more square footage of replacement of that. It has a little bit of a unique roof. I'll say the roof material that they used on that building is unique to any of the other buildings on the campus, where it is a slate rubber membrane, and then it's ballasted with insulation that has like an aggregate cover on it. that allows for both using that as walking pavers, and it is a great protective barrier on that roof. So the system actually has been very successful in protecting that roof for the life of the building. It's just that the UV radiation has now started to degrade that insulation, the edge of the insulation, where it's literally creating just channels where just stepping on it in some spots, it can cause the insulation to break. So we would recommend any kind of future use of that building to have a new roof system put on there. So when you start looking at the size of that building, it does get to be a little bit higher just because of the square footage that's there. With the gymnasium building, there also were the restrooms in the gymnasium building also need some required upgrades on for accessibility with that. There's also on the north side of the building, there appeared to be some water that had come in, whether it be a winter condition with melt, snow melt, but there was some flooding that appeared to have happened down the north steps of the building. Looking outside, it looks like that, we're thinking it was like a ice melt condition where the concrete's really broken up there. A lot of salt has been used there. So it's a lot of those kind of components that's driving that number up to be 1.8 million for that. Now, when you look at if you wanted to build a gym like that, we have that estimated right now at 9.7 million. So that being said, the mechanical systems are original vintage, and there are a lot more. Another part of what's in that $1.8 million is that that building acts as sort of a pseudo central utility plant for a number of the other buildings. So there's a number of boilers in that building serving other buildings that cost is being reflected in the gymnasium as well. I'll take a pause. 3 more buildings. Any more questions on those? Any general questions? Yeah.
We know over the years there have been ice and drainage issues with winter time and a lot of salt used. Are there other, entryways, doorways that have significant damage to them that need attention?
A good majority of each building, at some point, each building has some condition like that, whether it be, if you think of it like much like the doors we have in here, hollow metal frame, hollow metal door, throwing a lot of salt down there, a lot of moisture. You think of basically the month of March and April, where there's always a risk of ice, and that a lot of the frames at the bottom completely deteriorated. A lot of the doors are completely deteriorated. Some of them were replaced. The east side of the library, those were replaced with aluminum. Those hold up a little bit better, but they too are showing signs of wear. A lot of the concrete stoops outside of those doors have now really settled very differently, and those would need to be either mud jacked into position if they could be there, or just completely replaced. We see this a lot in school and campus type of environments, just because of the safety part of the conditions we live in. We have to salt, and no maintenance person, wants to have that issue on that. They will make sure that that is properly salted, and it is, for all of our benefit. The buildings end up taking the brunt of that. So, but yes, all of the buildings, I would say, had at some point in one area or another a significant amount of deterioration of both exterior concrete and of some of the doors that are there. Yeah.
Maybe now or later, but I didn't catch on building D, Melville.
Yeah.
The numbers for deferred maintenance and replace changed from your September presentation to now. I wonder how that.
Yes. We, no, yes, we went back and we were, I met with our engineering team and at that time, they did not have all of their items in here. And then we had another meeting and just sort of had, I'll say, a reassessment of everything that we saw. And so the numbers we have here reflect that revised change.
I was just surprised it went down instead of up.
Yes, I understood. And I think one of those items actually technically was part of I think that number had, one item I caught was the roof replacement as copper. So that now reflects that being and I'll say that like dropped it significantly. Yeah, from a civil standpoint, parking lots are, I can speak to that, the parking lots, if anyone has driven out there. I think most people would be aware they're in need of a complete resurfacing, probably a complete regrading, not just milling and resurfacing, but a regrading with how they are. A number of the walkways on campus, due to the amount of salt that is used out there, it has just either deteriorated the concrete or has just enough of the gaps between some of the concrete has significantly spread where now there's water infiltration and there's enough heaving. So the costs for that are not included with this. And that is something we can have as part of the final report that we provide. Yeah.
So does the proximity of the parking to some of the buildings, you mentioned this classroom building specifically, how does that impact reusability with being parking over here and then multiple buildings over here?
That's a great question. So a big part of that will be or the big defining item for that is what is the intended use for that building. If that ends up being ADRC, it would be great to have parking right up next to it. Now, does that mean that we're going to put a parking lot back there or recommend putting a parking lot back there? No, that will all be part of those considerations. So I think a good way to look at it, as a campus, this is a really fit environment. You know, young 20-year-olds walking all over the place. That building can be over there and you can park over here and there's an issue on a late November afternoon, having that building be for senior services is not appropriate. That really wants to have something a little bit closer. And that can be part of what these considerations are as we look at future uses for this space. One of the things that we were talking about, and again, this is having us as, I will be very, very forthright, not members of the community, looking at it from a completely white page of paper standpoint. One could say, hey, could you come in and take that entire square between the gymnasium, the library, Melville Hall? And if that just was like a loop, if you were to have a level of county services in there and take that entire square and make that a loop with appropriate parking for either reuse of a library, for senior services, there is space there to accommodate that. So the potential is good for that from a site standpoint. It's now, can the building sustain that same level of potential? Anything else?
Campus. on that, so.
Okay.
I do have one. So you mentioned the final report, including parking costs. As you know, we're dealing with one of the bridges next year. Would that final cost include the cost of the other bridge, or is that a separate?
Yes, yes, that will.
We go through the warehouse and human services building.
Sure. Yeah,
Sense of what we're dealing with in those two buildings.
absolutely. Let me share again. So we will start with second to pull up those. Oh, wait. So we will start with across the street with the HHS. So as many of you are aware, that building has grown over time from it being the original supermarket to the size building that it is today. And in going through all of the existing drawings that the county was able to share with us, it is so intriguing trying to put the puzzle together as to, we can find a drawing like we have here displayed of what that entire building looks like. And then when you find these other little components, like all was added onto and going through it to try to figure that out. And then being in the building during the assessment and being like, trying to identify where those spaces are. You go up on the roof and you're following all of that along. It's from, I guess, just from a building professional standpoint, it's kind of a nerdy thing to do the assessment of that. That being said, I think from a high level, the building is in good condition. The exterior of the building has an exterior insulation finishing system. It's called EIFS, EIFS. A lot of people think of it as stucco. And one of the pieces with that is, and there are a number of instances on the building, it is somewhat difficult to repair when it is compromised. So on the east side of the building, there were a couple of hits to it, and you can sort of see cracks in it. You can see the insulation. There is some I'll say, lath or coverage that's there that would need to be repaired. The one big, and it's understandable why that building was reclad when it was all put together with EIFS. And that's because it was a cost-effective solution to reclad a building. The unfortunate side of it is a good part of the industry no longer uses that because of some legal issues that had happened more technically down in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. So when you take an exterior of a building, whether that be block, plywood, whatever, and you apply insulation directly to that, and then you put some kind of finish on top of that, the moisture that gets in between there has no way to get out. And there were a number of lawsuits that came forward because of mold being in that interstitial layer between the insulation and I'll say the exterior sheathing of the building, whether that be block, due to the age of that building, the vintage of that building, we would presume that that is how that was constructed without any kind of additional investigation. We can't say whether or not that there would be anything there that's present from a mold standpoint, but we want to identify that there is a risk to that type of system being used. The way that has been solved is now that insulation is held off from whatever sheathing is there to give an air gap in there, so any moisture that's in there can come out. Can that be implemented here with this system? Not without ripping everything. So there is an inherent risk to the exterior of that building that just needs to be both identified by us and recognized by the county. A number of the windows that are in the building, they're as opposed to the campus, they are insulated glass windows, which is good. There were some identified areas where there was water damage to the windows. Looking at the way the water was coming in, and without any further investigation with it, beyond the assessment, we believe that water was likely more due to a roofing issue than a window issue, but the windows have been somewhat compromised, and there are a number that we would recommend to be replaced. Now, the fact that that entire building has been re-roofed of recent years, it appears as though that issue is no longer the case. So that's why we were leading ourselves to that point of, we think that it was more likely bad detailing on the roof, and with the re-roofing, that issue was taken. So exterior of the building, it's in good shape, good to fair. The roof is in good shape. We'll talk about the mechanical piece of it, because that is kind of the elephant in the room, and that is 14 elephants, all 14 residential size furnaces driving that building. Not necessarily the mechanical solution that our mechanical engineers were expecting. And I think they were somewhat surprised when they kept finding more furnaces in the building that were driving things. Now, that being said, we've talked about the, I think what's important to talk about with this building is where we've kind of come to at a point relative to the space needs side of it. This building, from a space needs standpoint, has a lot of, probably the best potential of any of the buildings in the county that we assessed. And we feel that with some reconfiguration and right sizing of spaces, that additional efficiencies could be optimized as a part of that. So with the roof being in really pretty good condition, the exterior being in okay condition, maybe some window replacement, this building could serve the county for quite some time in its current purpose. The other great part of it, going back to your question, Dave, relative to that classroom building, there's a lot of county services in this building that are accessed by the senior population of Richland County. The entry and exit into and out of this building is really phenomenal for that. It's at grade, it's easy to get in. You even on most winter days, you get a lot of sun in that parking area. It's well lit, so probably not a whole lot of freezing, but that can be tempered with additional maintenance on that. It really is an ideal location and use for that building as to where it is. The at-grade entry, and it's right, the parking lot being right there. We really could not ask for a better solution for the services that are in that building. So then, how do you address this furnace issue? One of the items that the mechanical engineer had come up with is one solution that would be a A cost-effective solution would be to go with more air handling units, replace the furnaces with air handling units on the roof that are more controlling zones in that building, and then using electric for heating. And that could be in a VAV box, which either goes to an office or a suite of offices, and that's a variable air volume box. So it has a damper in it, it can have cooling in it, it can have heat in it. And what he was recommending is if that heat, rather than being fed from a boiler, be fed from an electric, because then that's that much less piping that you would have to run that is currently not there. The electrical could happen. Yes, it's a little bit more costly. I see your face, Steve, on that. And in my conversation with our mechanical engineer, he's like, it's not the best solution, but it really would be, it's the cost benefit of, do you pay for all of that piping of having a boiler and a chiller system that is not currently there, and then piping it to each of these boxes? Or do you just say, we'll keep the boxes there and we'll just swap them out with an electric heat unit that's in there, and that initial cost might be high, but that might be able to be saved on the long-term part of that. That can be a discussion. That's a discussion just in and of itself for the use of that. Yes, Steve?
Just real quickly, I don't know much about them, but there's supposed to be a really high velocity, small diameter ducting system that's used for getting air with where you need it.
Sure.
I don't know anything about it, but maybe that, something like that.
I don't know anything about that either as the architect in the room, but we can certainly look at that for a future use of that, because our feeling is that building has the greatest potential right now for reuse for the county, and both from the parking accessibility, the parking count that's there, and the efficiencies that can be optimized in the reconfiguration of that building. Yeah.
Electrical type heating source, is that something that could be supplemented with some alternative energy to, like solar or something like that?
It definitely can. And that's a great question, because that could help subsidize some of what that cost could be with that. And you've got a whole lot of roof area on that building. And if you cut back on the number of furnaces and have fewer air conditioning condensing units up on the roof, you would have more room for solar array that's there. So that is something that could be considered. So overall, that building is really, say this is the short and sweet one of all of the buildings that we assessed. And I think initially going into it, we were knowing that it was kind of addition on addition on addition. We had an expectation like this might be a little bit of a mess in there. And it actually is really, from a real mechanical, structural, architectural, plumbing, it's a very well-functioning building. We're really pleased with that part. So we can now go to the courthouse, the sheriff's office, and the administrative building and the jail. And as when you go to that, I think we can address the big part of that, which we had presented this at the public meeting. So the big part here is, if we go to that, we'll start there. Maybe we'll take the roof plan. Building replacement cost. I'll address that. We have that identified right now as $69.5 million. That would be to sort of ground that number to understand what that is. $69.5 million would be if you built a like square foot government center today on a greenfield site. That would roughly be, with all of the uses that you have currently in sort of these three buildings, $69.5 million. So that is new courthouse, new jail, new sheriff's office, and then county administrative offices in there. That would be a $69.5 million building. So we include that just to get an understanding of, for you to have the understanding of what all of these uses would be in today's dollars.
You said that's like square footage.
Like square footage, yep.
It's not additional space. It's not based on any space needs study. It's just solely.
Correct. Yes, so, and that's a great point, because if that does not include any additional space that might be included with an expanded jail, or it is the square footage you have today. Now, after our meeting in September, the sheriff had shared with our team some drawings that he had, and I forgot the date that those were, of a study that was done to look at a jail addition in the East Park for expansion of the jail pod there. So we looked at that, and that part was not part of the consideration for the replacement cost, but that part is part of the consideration for the building renovation cost. Why would that be? Okay, that is the question there, is because the replacement cost is to understand what this facility is currently today. And if we were to have the board say we need to stay on this block, yet be compliant with our jail, be compliant with our courts, that would then be expanding all of those to meet current both Department of Corrections statutes for the jail and Supreme SCR 68, which is the Supreme Court ruling for the design of courtrooms. So in both of those cases, both the jail and the courts are not compliant with that. One thing to keep to keep that into context is that the jail portion of that's guided by the DOC statute 350, that is a state statute, and that needs to be complied with. The SCR 68 recommendation is just that. It is a Supreme Court recommendation for how a court in a circuit court should operate within the state of Wisconsin. It gives square footages for both what a jury room and what should all be associated with a jury room should be, the size of a courtroom, the size of a judge's chambers, what all needs to be a part of the judge's chambers. That is part of SCR 68, but it is just a recommendation. It's part of that. That being said, we do make every effort to comply with those in every design that we do, or exceed what those are. Where it gets challenging is when we have an existing condition of a courtroom, where that is where, and I think that if I were, I'm not even going to speculate why that is. We comply with that when it's there. So from that standpoint, we have met with administrative services and both, when I say administrative, that would be county clerk, county treasurer, register of deeds. I'll say everything that is up on the third floor here from an administrative level. And we've gone through the programming process with that and finding the right size of what those spaces need to be and the operational component. We've met with the sheriff's office to find out what their operational needs are and the space that they have. The big takeaway of those two components would be from space, everybody is making do with what they have currently, but they all could be they could be optimized in a much more efficient manner with replanning, i.e. some form of renovation with the current space that's here. There was not a whole lot of, I'll say, departments that were identifying a greater need for more space in that respect. So that is one piece. The other major piece is the room we are in today, the boardroom. There is concern from that our team has expressed relative to this boardroom is an assembly space for people, yet it is also a path of egress for the existing jail addition. While that is making do for now, that would be something we would certainly want to look at
changing that in any kind of future renovation or plan that we would recommend for this. This is not the ideal situation to be exiting through an assembly space, nor is it technically up to code. Restrooms and accessibility. Another big thing here. So the addition that was put on in 1991, it made that connector between the existing sheriff's office, the historic building, or the old sheriff's office, and the courthouse. It connected the two with the elevator, the stairs. There are bathrooms that are in there. We did do a calculation for the number of fixtures for the entire building. And I am happy to say you meet the fixture count according to 2015 International Building Code. Now, I was just as surprised about that as you were. But there are a number of toilets and lavatories and water closets in the sheriff's office and in other places in the building, not excluding the jail, that actually get you up to that number, the minimum number that's required. You're at the minimum number, sure you that. But from a count standpoint, the building has enough, and that includes the courthouse. So now, that being said, does that function the way it should? Not really. So the other major component to that is the restrooms that are in the addition part, the joining piece. With how that curve is, I think the women's room deals with that. That's just more of a more contained space. But with the men's restrooms, there is really, well, the women's restrooms as well. The accessibility part of that, the clearances are not there. So those restrooms for any renovation that would happen here would need to be upgraded to meet any kind of ADA accessibility requirements. That gets really difficult in the size space that is. And that was, I believe, one of these diagrams that I had brought up earlier relative to the size of what those restrooms are and how they function. And we've done a few studies as to could those restrooms be reconfigured and remanipulated in that footprint to be able to become or to meet accessibility requirements. And we were unsuccessful in doing that. So while you have the number of water closets and lavatories that code has set as minimum, they just don't fit in the space that they are, which would mean any kind of renovation would require some fairly radical changes to the way the restrooms are in this building for reuse. And that number is then reflected in the building renovation costs that we have identified on the summary report that we have here, that being at 54.5. So the jail is that is probably a discussion that could be for a much larger meeting. The bigger part of that is there are a number of deficiencies with DOC 350 and classification that are inmate classification that would need to be addressed. We have a discussion with Sheriff Porter relative to that, and it really should be treated as a sort of another discrete effort that the county can look at. From the standpoint of this, the footprint that the jail is in currently for the number of inmates that the population can be, there is some trouble with that. In the courthouse building, we can talk about that and with the courthouse building, yes, this is a courthouse. So it's old. I think we all know that it's old. What does that mean? Because it's old, it has really, really thick walls in that building in really difficult places, which makes it a real challenge to properly plan spaces in that building. We'll use the ground level where land conservation, maintenance, and many of the vaults are. And there are upwards to 2 to 3 foot thick walls in that space that really make the planning of offices in that really disjointed, really inefficient. As you move up to the first floor and the second floor where the courts are, a number of those thick walls continue to go up through and limit any kind of expansion or renovation in a fairly significant way with that. The courtroom is well beyond the size that's required by SCR 68. So that's a real positive. There are a number of operational inefficiencies and it's not just operational inefficiencies, but some operational concerns relative to the current layout of the courtroom itself, relative to the jury, the witness stand, the judge's stand, and with the well for the lawyers. That can be reconfigured, and a lot of those items can be changed without a radical renovation in that space, which is a positive thing. Most times when we talk about the jury room, a jury deliberation room typically has, as part of SCR 68, requires restrooms, requires a vestibule. There's no restroom there for that jury deliberation. Can we get one there? That would now be getting on the radical renovation side of things. So when we talk about building renovation, that cost is included as part of that. So I think as we start talking about the courtroom, we made a lot of effort to look at the accessibility of the building we're currently in, we'll say the West Building, the Sheriff's Office, and the courthouse. Well, there is the connector piece in between that has the elevator that gets you to multiple levels. We also recognize that by having the courtroom in the middle of the courthouse, it limits traffic of the public from one side to the other. So this number that we have for a renovation cost includes the cost of an elevator in the courthouse building to allow for separate vertical access to those floors. It also includes restrooms in the courthouse to take care of that. But this number, as much as we tried to work on a solution of making the courtrooms work in the courthouse, we were challenged with a viable solution that worked out well with a jail addition and inmate transfer to court that was secure. So what this number is reflecting is basically that jail pod that Sheriff Porter had provided us. That size, recognizing that that would be an appropriate size for a jail addition, and then having an addition to the east of that for a secure court, 2 courtrooms that would be there. That way, there would be no need for inmate transfer from the jail through public spaces, which is not part of SCR 68, or building something, i.e. a skywalk from the jail over to the historic courthouse. That's what the $54.5 million renovation cost includes, is moving the courtroom into the existing courthouse and the courtroom, building a new secure courts building, public courts building, jail addition, and renovation of these spaces as well.
Question time.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, we just redid the roof on the courthouse a couple years ago. And so I'm looking at the observed remaining life draft for the courthouse. I was hoping to see some roof out there in 20 or 25 years, not seeing that.
They brought that up when it said 40 years ago. I thought they found, remember when I called you?
Yes,
Yes.
that, I have not reflected that in this conversation. Or on, not just in the conversation, but
But
as
it
part
has,
of this.
the one that we can look at. That's what I'm saying, yeah, others that were.
So that's not accurate, that's a 5 or 10 year.
We'll have to update that.
On the majority, we have leaks there now, not out here.
Not where they redid the roof,
What they redid,
Everything.
this section, yeah.
yeah, so that actually is a good point. What this is reflecting is all, say, 3 of these buildings. So it's the courthouse, it's the long jail addition and administrative part, and it's the historic, I'll say, sure, when I say historic, they just mean old building, the sheriff's office. So it's identifying a lot of the metal roofing that is on the existing jail addition, so that is being reflected in here as well. It's an amalgamation of all of the roof systems together. But not reflecting the change that Steve had informed of the last.
Another question I had, again, looking at the observed remaining life category for the courthouse. And it makes you chuckle a little, but we've got minus 28 as the the oldest.
Yeah.
Past its life. I'm just curious for all these mechanical things here that are beyond their life. What does the deferred maintenance cost number get? I mean, are we talking placing a bearing or just very minimal stuff, or what's that do?
I would have to check back with our mechanical team as to how they input that, because that is knowing that a number of those items that we've got identified here on the observed remaining life of being minus 28 all the way up to minus 7.
Yeah.
I would have to verify with them what their assumptions were when they added the cost to that, to reflect that 330. Yes, that's a fair question.
So Kyle, with your comment about looking at space needed and looking at space available, it would seem that there is a fair amount of either underutilized or just plain wasted space in the existing configuration of the structure.
Correct. And a lot of that is just based off the existing footprint or layout of these buildings. I know when we were meeting directly with Candace's team, like one of the things that had come up is what we really just could use a private conference room, and there really isn't one here. It's this room, and it gets, the amount of committees and meetings that happen here, it really is difficult to have that. So that is part of the piece of it, where the way that building is just, or that specific building is designed, it's a double loaded corridor where you have the corridor down the middle, you have offices on either side, and you just take up the space that's between the corridor and the windows, whether that's the right amount of space for your department or not, or whether you need an office or you work in an open office area because there were no walls there to begin with. Now, what we have identified as a team as part of that from the space needs analysis is that footprint and the square footage of space that was identified by each department could be reconfigured with some renovation of walls that are in that space, non-load bearing walls, to make that a much more efficient space. So it can work. It just isn't working as well as it really could be. The same would be said across the street at the HHS building, where there are some demising walls where an addition was built onto, and they didn't, because it's load bearing, and they just made some holes here or there to get through that wall. That can be a little bit of a limiting factor with that. Now, some of the offices are far bigger than they need to be. Some offices are probably far smaller than they should be.
So it's right, like if we could start with a clean slate, right sizing some of those spaces really could optimize efficiency. Is that the best course of action? Well, that's a pretty costly course of action to just start on a clean slate, because now where do we relocate these people when we're doing all of that renovation? So our team is looking at what are some of these sort of incremental steps that could happen with existing open space to begin. It's almost like the Tetris effort of moving one thing to here and just continuing to enhance that area in a much more efficient way. And we recognize that there is good potential for that in that space. And I think one other point to that is also optimizing adjacencies of departments, having the right department in the right location that isn't far deep into the space, and having more front-facing departments being closer up to the parking lot where they can be managed in a much better way.
Questions?
So we have no other questions.
So,
Thank you very much for the information.
Yeah.
Gives us a lot to chew on.
we'll continue the discussion.
Right, item B under reports, update on committee document filing structure. We had some discussion about that in our last meeting.
Yeah, and so Barb, we did talk with Barb, I don't know if she's on, and she was trying to come up with a few different ideas. But I think this is also better left, until at which point you decide whether you're gonna stay with iPads or go to computers or both. Because that kind of impacts all of that. As far as, you know, how you want the documents and how you see them and how we see them, you know, apparently, you know, in discussions with her, she said you have access to the folders. It's just a matter of how do you find them. And I know the search function isn't great. So, Derek and I have spoken with her. We're working on it, but I think we're putting the cart before the horse now with the discussion of, are we gonna stay with iPads? Are we gonna go to computers? Or is everybody gonna choose what they want? And then we have kind of a multifaceted discussion then, because again, you won't see things the way we will because we're on the network and we have, you know, we have VPN access. There's all sorts of different things. And so, it's not as simple as, oh, create a folder and here's where it is. Because it's clearly not working when we're doing it that way now. So it's an in-process discussion.
So I guess if we have access to those, but don't know how to get them, can we get some instruction on how to get them?
Well, and it may be that simple of a retraining, having Barb come in and sit with all of you and train again or show you again how to do that.
Someone do a video of what.
I don't think it's so much that you can't find them. It's just that the process is extremely clunky and, you know, there's a lot of back and forth.
Is there a way to build shortcuts?
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, that's one perspective. The other piece is, how do we file things? The actual file structure itself, is it organized in a way where you don't have to do a search? You know where you go to look to find things. There's both pieces of that. And maybe if we had laptops that had the same access, it would be obvious to me, but it's not through here.
Right, yeah, because I mean, we do have a folder and it has all of your documents in it that we dump in there and they're all there. But you guys don't seem to see them then.
Well, that's the difference, like at Hartson, we have local, which is a lot faster, or I could be on our sister, which is out of Madison, so it's gotta go from Marina to Madison and back. So then looking at documents there, so that's almost the same as you guys are.
So
And-
you're
and
saying
the
for a
discussion-
committee, you would have one large folder that would have all the documents, whereas we see it broken out into meeting dates, years, etc.
But we have a reference document folder too, and that, everything goes in there.
There is a reference document folder that did contain some of those documents I think we looked at last,
Right,
right?
it's
Like
just not
the initial
everything.
correct, and that kind of stuff. So, so yes, there is a reference document folder. Does it have everything dumped in there as one? No, but it had at that time, anyone that wanted some of those initial documents to review could be in there. So,
Are you talking specifically for this committee?
yeah.
Because all it has in mine is the master plan from 2013.
And that very well could be, that's all that's in there. So there was, when I look at it on mine, when I go to the post reorg thing and I go to campus reconfiguration, you're right, I have, like for 2024, because it's broken up by 2024 post reorg, because that's when we reorg. Then I have a file for May and June for those meetings, and then the one for October that we had the meeting prior to this, and there's a reference document. And you're right, Ingrid, it only has that master plan in there. So I think we can, you know, we could add documents as you guys want to add it in there, and they'd be in one folder.
For example, like this facility
Correct.
document, because I don't even know where the one that he presented in September, I'm not sure where to, you know.
Last one. Yeah, I think that
Just to have it help, like those kinds of documents that we want to refer to again and again, to not be in a specific meeting date folder.
Right.
Understood, and I think the reason that this is set up is because when we go to take this and dump it on the website, I have to load it in here to
Right.
say, MIS, please upload this specific file to make your agenda packet appear the way it does on the
Yeah.
website. So that's why it's broken out like that.
Right,
That being said, it's my understanding that when the new website is up and running, that there may be some variations on how this data needs to be even organized this way before it gets posted on the website. So the reason for those files is an operational purpose to upload stuff.
well, and I
To
get
the
that, but maybe that just means some redundancies then.
Well,
You know,
correct.
Like you have it in there and you also have it in the reference.
If
document.
you, so, and that was the comment that was made last time, is we can dump that stuff into a reference document, one folder, then we have it in two spots, and I think Barb kind of mentioned that or something, so that's the way it's set up,
Yeah.
because that's how it works.
And then we're gonna get the calls, well, which one's the right one? Which
Right.
one's the most recent one? Which
Right.
one are we supposed to be looking at? And so then that creates another layer of issue of, nope, the most recent document is the one that was, you know, for this date at this time on this committee.
There's no way
And
to
so-
put clickable links in that reference document folder where it would just take you to the most current
No.
version?
I don't think so, because we have to then keep track of what the most recent version is, and we don't
Well,
always
of
know.
course, and this doesn't use Google, I was gonna say, even like a Google Doc can do that, you can have.
I
you know,
mean, I did ask the question too, when we're on Office 365, will that make things easier? Because then we could maybe use like a SharePoint site. And we could put all those documents on a SharePoint and they would live there. That may be a solution, and we're making that transition
Yeah.
very soon. So rather than all this complicated stuff,
Just wait.
it may be wise to wait, do that, have a SharePoint site for each committee, and that's where all those documents could potentially live.
Yeah.
And just make it easier. So, we're not, unfortunately, our technology is not overly user friendly. So it's kind of a juggling game as each one has a pitfall right now. And we're trying to figure out the best solution for all of you without making it worse.
Steve. I want to emphasize again, we need to make sure we think about the actual file structure itself. For example, if this turns into a project and there's blueprints, you don't just put them in the blueprint. You put one folder with subfolders, one for architecture, one for electrical, one for plumbing. That kind of breakdown structure that's.
I have that
repetitive,
already.
logical.
It's in the courthouse design
Yeah, like that.
folder.
And so
It's all there, yeah.
that same concept for all the other files we do is what I'm saying.
it'll come.
Yep. Because there is, underneath, if you look at your committee information, there's an administrative document and a courthouse design plan document. Now, that's all the 2016 stuff. There's a newer one, or there's another folder that has, but it is arranged that way. And
So
so,
are you talking about the main folder is like 2022, 2023, and then there's the courthouse design plans? Is that the most current?
no, that's the 2016 version,
Then why is it in the main section?
because it's used as reference for everything that they have done.
So the one that you're referencing, we don't have access to.
No, it's courthouse design plans.
Well, that's what I'm clicking on,
Yep.
but you just said it was 2016. I'm
The
confused.
one that I have is 2016. I don't know what you have.
Okay, this is what ours looks like. So this is,
So if you click with
like, it has all the
Right.
folders from
Yep.
2013.
if you click that.
So
So
this
it's
would
got
be all
all-
the current
It's
stuff.
got all the stuff, no, it's not current, I don't believe. It's all the historical stuff. which is what.
But
we
I'm
have
saying like
used.
it's what you guys have been using.
Yeah.
Like it's the same as yours, okay?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like this is a discussion that's a lot more than just the way that we store documents for this committee, but perhaps like how the county stores documents countywide, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Steve's getting at, and I think, we have started to, we lived on paper for a very long time here, right? So now we're starting to digitize and scan documents into files that are similar to the structures that you're alluding to, that you just, you wouldn't see because we're working on that, in the background as documents come in. So I think the discussion you have is very warranted. I think it is, something that is larger in scale that we need to look at, but I know what you're getting at. You're looking at a countywide document storage thing, right? So part of this will be addressed with the, Tyler, thank you.
Yeah.
Tyler.
Document management.
Also
software.
with Civic Plus 2, with our codification, there's a platform for us to store documents in there that can be organized electronically in a much different format than what we have now. Now, is that gonna happen tomorrow or next month or the month after? Probably not, but we are getting those software tools available to us and starting to slowly digitize the mounds of paper we have. But I totally understand what you're saying, and it's a countywide thing, Steve, and I think we'll work on that as we get the tools from the various resources we have.
Much better than 8 years ago.
Yes.
Sounds great.
I say it's counting. It takes time. We're getting 365, that's an improvement.
So
Good for us to be mindful of that as we're getting more information like this, or what happens all the time. Yes.
one more comment on that, and I think that this goes to the other problem of like, and I don't know if it's the convenience or ease of this, or if it's simply we don't have enough time, but for example, certain folders are not necessarily always updated with the current, for example, we have the admin documents folder for us, which is helpful. It's broken down into like HR, committee, orientation materials, etc. But then if you click on like the committee one, for example, it still has the committee assignments from last term. It's not been like updated. So those kinds of things, I don't know, like
That's file management.
exactly, and I don't know if that's.
Well, no, she's talking, I see what you're saying, like, if you go to the committee folder, yes, it has like committee, well, this one says 2022 to 2024. That's a project number, right? I don't know if you guys see it, so since it's could be different. Right, so
Right.
some of this stuff just is that there's a lack of human means to
That's
keep
what I was
that
getting
up
at.
and do everything else. Hopefully, with the digitization of records and all this new software, these files will not really be necessary, but it just takes humans to do that, and we don't have the humans to do that currently.
That's a bigger discussion than we're here to talk
Right.
about campus.
Right.
Yeah.
Management.
All right, thank you for the update. We will stay tuned for improvements. Item number 8, discussion and possible action, UW redevelopment grant.
So I did receive an email from Ela, who is our regional coordinator. And this was last week, and she said it will be another week or two before the new application is uploaded, and she will let me know once it is ready and available for us.
With new wording.
With removing the offensive language, as Andy Phillips likes to say. So, yes. So I eagerly await that, and we'll get it submitted as soon as it comes through my email.
Do we get interest?
I doubt it.
Do we get what, interest? That'd be excellent.
So the discussion was had, and who made the decision to change it? The economic development? or-
No. This was, so, well, as you know, I told you, I fired off emails to everybody I could think of, and to Andy Phillips. And Kyle Christensen from WCA, as well as Andy Phillips, really championed this through. They worked their magic, and they actually, Andy called me as soon as he got off the phone with the governor's office and said, I think we're getting traction here. And then before you know it, he called and said they're removing the language.
Okay.
So this is really
But
based on
changing-
our partnerships and building those relationships because they matter. And so, yeah, huge thanks to WCA for their assist. And Joan Ballwig's office did send me an email back as well, but WCA had it pushed through before I even needed to. So,
Sounds like a combination of pressure from
WCA, from legislators, from the governor's office.
Correct.
All came to bear and
That's the way the system should be. When things happen.
the system worked, it wouldn't happen. for sure.
That was my thought.
Well, but,
The way things get corrected.
Yes, yes. Change was effective.
Yes.
utilize your resources.
Yep.
Exactly.
Right, so no action to take on that yet. Item 9, discussion of possible action, inventory of campus items and associated costs.
Josh had said he was maybe going to be on, but I don't know if he's feeling a little under the weather. So he has been, working with, like, what is he? Huh?
Retired,
Ron Chamberlain.
Yep.
SEH, there we go. SEH Consulting, we have a contract with them for things like this. And so they have been out basically looking for options for us. And so they have identified a company that they believe would be up to the task of doing the inventory and getting us an accurate accounting of all of the contents of the buildings. We have a meeting next week and a walkthrough so that we can narrow down what it's going to look like. As Josh said, it's not going to be cheap, but they can do the inventory and they could do the auction. So rather than having to, if we hire someone just to come in and do an inventory now, if we then later decide to do an auction, that company would want to come in and do their own inventory anyway. So this is kind of a 2 birds with 1 stone prospect. And so we'll see what they say. And then based on that information, we can, go out and ask them to price it with a couple additional companies as well. So that's where we're at right now. We're working through it and we'll hopefully have some more definitive information after the meeting next week.
Does that still leave us flexibility then to consider Brandon's concerns? We may or may not do with the inventory as opposed to strictly auction.
Yeah, it certainly does.
we just need to know what we have, right?
Well, I'm just saying, I didn't know what kind of contract we were going to have to sign.
Nothing is signed at this point.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. It is just proposals at this point.
So we did have a discussion that we were gonna go out, Dave and Candace and I were gonna go out and look at things. This month kind of fell apart, so we were planning to do that on Thursday.
For
And
a
one
walkthrough, get a
o'clock
sense
just to walk through, get pictures, make sure that we have, so we can bring back to this group an understanding of some of what is there. Won't be a detailed inventory, but at least we'll have something.
And the very limited items that have now been reutilized in the administration area consist of about 6 filing cabinets, 2 desks, and a small table and 6 chairs, or 8 chairs. So, and we have kept an accounting of all of that. I've got it written down so that we know, we didn't write where it came from, we just, that we have it.
Did we, I can't remember where we were at on like timing this, but were we doing an inventory of departments to see what they needed, or were we waiting until we had an actual inventory to see?
No, we were not waiting.
Okay.
So I sent out an email to all department heads with the instructions that Derek and I were given, which is Randy and Candace, you pick out what you think will work based on what they're asking for. Now, I will tell you that there are some departments asking for 12 desks. Well, we may not have 12 desks to give overall. I mean, because not every desk out there is reusable or is in better condition than some of the things we have here. So we're basically going to compile all the lists, look at what all the requests are. And, if we think we have 15 usable desks, we'll start off giving everybody 2, trying to be as fair and equitable. I will tell you, I have already had demands for walkthroughs. I've been accused of taking some departments through and not others, which is not true. This is going to be an ugly process no matter which way it goes because it's scarcity. We don't have enough to go around for everybody and everybody's scrambling. So we will do our best to be fair and equitable in the way that we distribute items. And the nice thing too about these desks though is the way that they're configured at the campus, they can be pieced together. So one desk in one office might make up 2 smaller desks for some of our offices. And so I do think there is potential there to maximize what we do have, as long as we just put some thought into it. So that is one great thing that we discovered when we were moving pieces around just in our 2 offices, was that, you know, you can kind of piecemeal it together and make it work. So hopefully that will assist us, especially because some of our office spaces aren't exactly squared. So hopefully that'll work out well.
Your questions on that item? Hearing none, we will move on to item 10, discussion and possible action, campus reconfiguration committee name change. Seen a few suggestions coming through from different people since our last month's discussion. I don't know that we're ready to move on anything at this point. We're still in our assessment and information gathering phase. Yes.
Last meeting we discussed taking it to county board to discuss like the makeup of this committee and what its scope was. So is that coming on to this county board's agenda?
No, we looked back, and realistically, when we looked back, this committee was really formed to decide, you know, what is happening with the campus and the campus buildings. Not for future planning, not for strategic planning, not for long-term planning. And the immediate problem that we are facing, and part of the reason why Kyle is here right now, is winter is coming. And we need to really focus in on, do we think these buildings are salvageable? Do we want to continue to heat them through the winter? Do we want to have the water turned on? Do we want to do those things? Because, you know, as you well know, the costs per month are upwards of $10,000 just for utilities with nobody or very few people. We have, you know, a handful of people from extension in those buildings. And so I do think we really need to focus right now very narrowly on what are we doing before the snow flies, and then we can explore the bigger picture after the fact. But we really have some decisions that we really do need to be making, simply because we need guidance on what you all want us to
Do
do.
we need to get that on the agenda to make those decisions? Because I haven't seen that here to say, we're shutting down this, and this for the winter. I mean,
No, that was part of the discussion that was gonna happen organically tonight after we heard Kyle's presentation. It's
okay,
just,
didn't know that.
So having it on next agenda for a specific
Specific.
discussion would
Yeah,
probably be
yeah.
appropriate.
Thank you.
I agree with that, but I don't necessarily see why that needs to stop us talking with the board about expanding the scope of this, because we can still be operating within our current scope while simultaneously discussing what would the bigger scope of this be. I mean, because at a certain point, we're gonna make those decisions. We need to continue moving forward on what Kyle and venture architects are bringing forward. Like, I just feel like they're both feeding into each other. Might as well be discussing it.
I don't disagree with you. But I think when you look at, you know, the complete report that we got, the courthouse, the HHS building, there are issues bigger than what this group was chartered for. I think we'll need to go back to the board, yes, but I think there'll need to be a determination of, okay, do we want to leave this group in place and expand its mission? Do we want to form a separate, you know, strategic property planning committee or something? You know, how does the board want to proceed?
But that's what I'm saying. Why can we not have those discussions simultaneously continuing what we're already commissioned to do?
Well, I think we can, I agree with Dave, it's not gonna be just this committee.
Yeah.
Guide what we're gonna
Right,
do.
exactly.
I don't know if we're ready to start those big discussions yet, because we need to figure out the small stuff first. And then, you know, and I'm not saying we're waiting a year or anything, I'm saying maybe a month or two down the road, we go back to the board and talk about, okay. We've
I
got
just
our
don't
details.
just go. And it, you know, well, meanwhile, we need to be making our decision. So that's why I was thinking we should maybe get ahead of that portion of it.
The challenge of
Start
getting
with
ahead
it.
is then you get buried in stuff that you don't have answers for yet. And again, not that we shouldn't be talking about those things, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but.
The makeup of how we're gonna get there. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
How are
could
we
be
gonna
a starting
get to
point.
a decision on this, that?
We should be bringing those
Not gonna be us.
I mean, at the very least, as presented as an update to the board, like this is where we're going. We need to start thinking about what would the future makeup of this committee or a separate committee look like? What would the scope be? Please be thinking about that. Come back for a discussion. I mean, something like that.
We should be bringing those recommendations to the.
Perhaps that would be appropriate for the Member County Board meeting.
Yeah.
Give that update.
Steve, they're inextricably linked. I mean, the fate of the campus drives decisions of what we're doing here. So however you want to say it, whether it's this committee or second committee, or it's going to come up that we have to put them together. So.
I don't think we have the time or the ability right now to do both. Agreed. So, I mean, it's almost gonna be if it's a building committee or a renovation committee versus, we're still working, this group is still working on, it's gonna be demolition or remodel. Second bridge, we may not build a second bridge there. It may be somewhere else if we're building a parking lot out back. It's all that stuff that's gotta be, don't happen that fast, but we do need to let the rest of the 21 know this is what's gonna be happening.
I mean, this is a huge deal. They've heard this little bit of it, the previous part of it. But to be able to understand the scope of like how this will impact and that, I mean, I personally think that is a larger committee. Obviously, we've run into the quorum issue. So then there's discussion, is this a full count? You know what I mean? Like, are you breaking it down and making it as big as we can? But regardless, like, I think they need an update, and the sooner the better. I mean, I don't know why we couldn't have that on this.
Well, we're gonna have a pretty,
Or is it like,
It was like
is it like
30
30
points already.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
but for the November meeting, I think it's a great idea. We haven't met in November past
Yeah.
this year, so let's use that meeting and bring an update for this, yeah.
Okay.
Very good. All right, so we'll get that, make plans for the November county board meeting to get the full board an update as much as we have to give at that time. I don't think we have any other action then to take on this item. So item 11 is correspondence. Correspondence to share with the committee.
Mr. Chair, not just correspondence, but I received a request from a citizen requesting I add the last name to individuals when I'm doing roll call in the minutes. Not really interest correspondence, but I did receive that request.
All right, people are paying.
Just emails from Alan Lins, but I assume we all got those.
Yes, there were emails that went from Alan Lins to members of this committee, raising some very high level points about, objectives and things like that, that should very much be part of the future consideration of decisions, so. From that. Speaking of future consideration, future agenda items for this committee. And when do we want to meet next? Mr. Carroll.
What's our next interaction with Venture? I'm not sure what next step is.
I would suggest that the next meeting would be really to talk about the space needs analysis. There's really, the information on the campus is what it is. He's given you pretty much all of that. The only piece of the puzzle that we haven't talked about is space needs and realistically some of the proposals that they have for potential future planning. And so.
And it is relevant to this committee
I'm
because
just
the county space needs might.
Is next meeting the right time to do that?
Again, my fear is that we're gonna run into snow because we're focusing on these other things and we're not focusing on what guidance we need to decide what to do with those buildings. So I mean, if we want to have that discussion first and then we want an additional update in the same meeting, wonderful. I just know we, meaning me, I need guidance on what you all want us to be doing and preparing for those buildings out there because it's getting.
Implementation is like
So that's.
now. So in other words, we need to meet within the next, yeah.
So what do we have in the next 2 weeks?
Despite our current weather conditions, we will gain.
That's a vote. In our team, we can go back and do, I'll say, focused analysis. Because recognizing the space needs analysis discussion is
Huge.
big and broad.
Well, the
We can try to
regulation in November, so
like,
not
focus
everything-
that, yeah, based off of the understanding of the motivations.
You got to stack
Like, understand and what
But we can't do it on election day.
to be able to provide, and then next week, immediate recommendation based off.
Everyone would rather we not.
initially, some of the space needs
Okay.
to that, to just give this community the best information.
Yeah.
To agree.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I invite the department heads because I told them that when we got to that point, I wanted them to be here for the discussion because they were part of all
Every
of those
Tuesday,
discussions as
Yeah.
well.
We've met on Thursdays in the past too.
What are we looking to do?
When we get past the election. Somebody's got something to do that day, I guess.
For the next 2 weeks after the election.
And wine and crackers.
I know.
So
And cheese.
immediately after that would be like.
Well, what about,
7th.
I mean, if we just need to discuss the winterization, oh gosh, I know the planning board meeting's gonna be really long, but like, could we fit in a discussion? I mean, like next week? I mean, we're already having freezing.
Well, we have the executive on Monday. And then board on Tuesday.
Wait, when?
Okay,
We're just looking at next week. We're talking next week. Yeah, Monday, the 28th, we have executive.
I was just trying to get on top of things.
Yeah.
Sixth Wednesday, that far out.
That's day after. Well,
I won't be doing election stuff until the 12th of November, so. That's the way it works.
I mean, we can meet, I can run the.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't necessarily.
All right. So we want to look at Wednesday, the 6th.
I'm fine with that.
So 5.
5 PM. Okay with everybody? Have those discussions about interim impacts and decisions. A little more about space needs.
So, Mr. Chair, for that.
Kyle, will you be able to, does that work?
Yeah,
Okay,
I cannot confirm their team's availability right now.
and if it
Pretty sure.
virtually works better for you too, I mean, I think we're fine with that, so that you don't have to make the long drive. Did you want him here in person? I mean, do you feel?
No.
I think our standards of what we need to do out there right now.
Not that we aren't happy to see it, but.
Yes.
You're a very savvy organization. So we have to do that.
For your agenda items for the next meeting.
It's appreciated, but,
Campus building,
Yeah, not many.
The space needs analysis
Even
finding.
just
Yes.
very
Um,
rough committees.
proposals. Bob, did that address your future agenda item that you noted? I had next steps that.
Next step, yeah, I was gonna talk about the heating.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, call it next step.
Okay.
Call it next step.
So inventory update, we'll put on there.
Yeah. Will that include like winter maintenance out there?
As far as.
Winterization of campus buildings.
There you go.
Okay.
Because somebody's gonna check buildings every day like they are. At least enough so they can walk through.
We have our Parks and Trails maintenance man that is also going to assist with the campus property in the winter and assist Randy in the winter as well when he has downtime. So I think that could be something that could be part of that discussion. Is if Brian is going to take on some of that and what that's going to look like.
Any other future agenda items?
5 PM for the meeting, right?
All right.
Yeah, and thinking of that, we'll reach out to the mechanical team or say the engineering team and.
That's what we're gonna need to know because
Try to-
Mr. Rennish has quite a bit of experience with boilers, and if some of the boilers are running, it's gonna cost you more to flush them than it is to run them.
Yeah, okay.
So that's where we're gonna need, and I don't know if they're gonna have enough time.
They'll
Yes, they will.
they'll be prepared.
By the sixth, you said?
So in other words, to give us recommendations for how to.
I remember when Kenny was on here before, and he talked about that.
Right, so by the sixth, they'll have some recommendations on shutting down, not shutting down.
They will, I will say they will be able to help advise this committee.
Okay, so will they be on the call then, or we can bring that in?
I'll try to get them.
That would be great. I think that would be a huge help solution.
Recognizing that is critical matter.
Yes, thank you. And that's the input we need.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Glassbrenner, second by Supervisor Pike. I have to skirt over to. All those in favor, say
Aye. Aye, or adjourned. Thank you.